The subject we're examining in this short series is kitting out your vehicle interiors, so they're both realistic and eye-catching. In the process, we'll be checking out techniques, tools and products which can help you get authentic looking results. The interiors of fighting vehicles can be cramped, cluttered and worse for wear. When you consider what a crew has to transport into battle and that they'll be living out of their machine for weeks on end, well, it means the real insides of an AFV are going to look busy. So you've carefully constructed your model. Maybe, like with this Academy M113 A1 Acav from the Vietnam War, you've added some brass, perhaps your own scratch-built details. Like here, you may have already assembled and painted your interior, but it just looks empty, barren or deserted. Using this 1/35th scale model, I'll show you how I built and detailed the interior. You'll see the techniques I used and hear some tips along the way. I wanted to show lots of the inside, and in the case of an Acav, it would involve showing the specific loadout for this kind of mobile firepower platform. With the rear access ramp down and hatches open, I was going to have to turn most of my attention to the interior. If you're wondering, this model is already featured in a 4-part diorama series, and it also appeared in 1 or 2 other videos on the channel. I've never covered how I made the interior, so I decided now is the time. The starting point was this relatively recent reboxing of an older Academy M113 release, and a kit which, at the time of purchase, was the best stab at a NARM era Acav in 1/35th scale. It comes in a box boasting a healthy selection of accessories and pleasing touches, like detailed single-link tracks, and vehicle or weapons options aplenty. I added an Eduard Photo-Etched set to the shopping list and began construction and detailing. The brass was useful to provide the engine grills, hull grab handles, periscope guards, thinner shields for the 50 cal and the side M60s, as well as a few finer features within the turret itself. Fine lead wire, meanwhile, was used to detail the headlight's power supply. Plastic card was used to make rivets and add various small details to the exterior. Like any vehicle, the M113's interior was very cluttered and full of cables and wiring. You can see that in these reference shots. That will all need to be reproduced in miniature. I used copper, electrical wire and lead wire to make the front driver's compartment and radio area look more realistic. It wasn't necessarily 100% accurate, being more an exercise in making the interior look busy. Anytime I saw a detail in my references, I tried to replicate it as best as possible, mainly in plastic card or plastic rod. The only exception was the engine, which I left straight from the box. This meant that the interior could be painted. Remember that vehicle interiors will be worn and well used. It follows that you'll need to weather them like an exterior, showing sensible levels of wear and tear. This was largely done off camera, but I showed the usual areas of chipping, scratches and oil spills. As the reference shots also clearly show, military vehicles are full of information placards and markings. These are commonplace on machines of all eras, and thankfully you can get various aftermarket decals to fill the void. One of the best suppliers was Archer Fine Transfers, which closed in 2022, but the business reins have been taken up by a new team and you can now get them at archertransfers.com. Handily, the Academy kit includes plenty of decals for the interior markings and placards, which helps add some visual interest. However, boy did it look empty, the exact opposite of period archive material. It was time to add some much needed clutter and signs of life to the Acav. I decided to raid my accessories box for Vietnam era goodies which came from Verlinden Productions, from the kit itself or from the spares box. If you love kitting out your models with gear and stowage, then like most modelers you'll love running a well-stocked spares box. Mine has been lovingly curated over many years, and it's an archive of lots of old resin, plastic and even brass parts, some of which are positively ancient. It's quite sentimental for me to see these older pieces from manufacturers who have since disappeared. The next tip then is to carefully choose a combination of spares, and we can add custom bits later too. I find it best to start off with a good cross-section of period correct pieces and grab more than you think you'll need. To simplify painting, I like to attach my accessories to a backing with double-sided tape. I can then paint them en masse on the card. As I planned to have lots of ammo in the vehicle, I had a separate painting session just with Verlinden resin ammo boxes. As I needed so many, I moulded some more with a silicone mould, and I'll be sure to vary the finish colours of all the boxes. I've done a video on moulding, but suffice to say you'll need to pick your items, mount them on runners, and create a box structure to hold the silicone mould, in this case using Lego, and cork for the runners. You slowly pour the silicone and then let it cure. It's worth tilting and manipulating the mould to get the silicone to flow and capture all the details before it sets. Ideally, you'd also coat the pieces in mould release agent too beforehand. If you'd done it correctly and left enough room between the pieces whilst avoiding excessive undercuts, you can pour in 2-part polyurethane resin and you're away. It cures quickly and lets you make multiple batches. Try to get as few air bubbles as possible in the resin, and it may help to brush it or poke and prod it into the crevices and details during the pour. Doing it this way without a vacuum chamber is not perfect and there will be wastage, but you should get some pleasing reproductions. In order to prepare ahead of time, I did a number of runs of ammo boxes for the model's interior and exterior, and like all the accessories, they'll all be painted in a similar way. I usually begin with a quick airbrush coat before moving to brush painting the details. Here you can see how I approach that painting, with the pieces first being primed in black. Then some main colours are blocked out by airbrush for speed. I next move on to the brush painting, here with acrylics. Using thin coats I build up the colours. Don't try and get immediate coverage, brush it on thin and wait for it to dry. When ready, go again and reapply. Then, as is pretty traditional, I progress to shadow washes before ending with highlights and scratches in lightened shades. Here are those moulded castings. You can see all the ammo boxes have been painted in a variety of green tones, and there's a great selection of ammo boxes to use. Here are all the painted items. You'll notice there's brush applied chipping and weathering. But more can still be done, like adding some wood grain to the weapon's stocks with a really fine brush. And don't be too worried, as you can tidy it up later. Metallic sheen can be added with a pencil and a blending pencil. Then it's time to do more detailed highlighting on soft items like pouches or sacks, bedrolls and items of clothing. Approach these as you might a figure and lavish the same levels of attention on them. Go for progressively lighter highlights to create a 3D effect. This will make the items jump out from their background when they are placed inside the vehicle. Here we can see the entire process of adding highlights to a previously base coated and dark shadow washed bedroll. What you're doing is hitting all the raised areas and edges so it contrasts with the previously applied dark washes. For the finest highlights, it may help to reach for a fresh set of fine detailed brushes. These will also help to add the finest scratches and areas of wear and tear to specific accessories, like here the cool box. Items that are going to be very scratched or worn were first painted in silver and then coated in hairspray or chipping medium. They'll then be chipped with various aggressive tools and plenty of water. You can see my videos on the chipping technique. Dust and mud effects are also a neat touch using the airbrush or dry pigments. Try to spray around the base of the stowed gear or in areas where dust will accumulate. You can also use the same colours inside the vehicle to unify everything. The detail painted accessories are now ready to be detached and to find their place in that empty interior. I love this stage of model making. Once all the items were painted, I could start the most enjoyable part of this build for me: populating the interior and working out how to stow all those accessories. I had great fun trying out different things from my menu of painted items and seeing what looked best. Once I had the larger parts worked out, I fixed them in place with white glue. Then I started to place all the medium-sized items like personal weapons, food cans, water bottles and ammo pouches, to name a few. The beauty of using white glue is that you can try different things and see what works, removing and fixing as you see fit, and even if dry, the glue can always be undone or removed. Then it was time for the finishing touches, those tiny details which make the interior really come alive. Cigarette packets and drink packaging came from paper accessories, in this case from Real Models' various sets. A pack of smokes with fuse wire cigarettes is near the driver's station. I used the Vietnam War Budweiser beer boxes and cigarette pack carton and boxes sets from Real Model. Empty shell cases or ammo links from live resin were liberally strewn around the Acav floor. I made wrappers and litter from Tamiya quick-type putty, which was painted and shoved into nooks and crannies. Also, in terms of crew comfort, an inflatable mattress or lilo was sculpted using two-part epoxy putties, both epoxy sculpt and Tamiya quick-type putty. In the end, I much preferred the Tamiya putty and painted the mattress in coats of Tamiya lacquer and gave it a vibrant blue colour to make it pop. The outside too got some initial details like a row of frags and smoke grenades from the ultra-realistic Bravo 6 resin set. The next step was to add some sandbags to protect the driver from mines, a common feature I'd identified in my research. Kneader-tight Duro, a green two-part epoxy putty, was perfect to replicate this feature, and I used some netting pressed into the putty to add surface texture. I used some foil so the sandbags wouldn't stick, and that way I could paint them and affix them with white glue later. A pin-up from Archer was added, and a copy of Playboy magazine was on hand for the crew. Even more items would be added externally in the final stages, like more of the moulded ammo boxes. Once painted in different variants of green, they all received applications of Stencil decals for added realism. The set used came from the Archer AFT waterslide decal range and they look superb. The external stowage would be even more dusty than the items inside, so it got subtle dust washes with liquid pigments. final enamel wash from MIG Productions added a bit of shadow detail. Lastly, it was all tied down with Tamiya masking tape straps. It's worth noting that not all the Vietnam accessories I painted were used on the final model. And if you're interested in how I painted and weathered the exterior of the M113 Acav, I'll release a dedicated painting guide on that to coincide with the new book I've been working on. That brings this episode to an end. In future videos, I'll be looking in more detail at adding stowage and realistic touches to the insides of other models, as well as more insights into realistic exterior stowage too. If you enjoyed it, please leave a thumbs up or leave a comment on how you tackle these all-important little touches which bring your models to life. Until then, thanks for watching, bye and see you soon. Oh, and if you want to follow the build process of this model in the Vietnam diorama in book form, keep an eye out for this forthcoming release from Mr. Black Publications.
Subscribe for our latest videos.